And so I personally am interested in the economy just because outside of the environment, which would mostly just be the world, all there is the economy. What else is there other than the economy and the environment? And so any type of human systems which we interact with people in is pretty much the economy. So you might as well know about it. And so I think I know about it, and I have a camera, and so you can add me to the ranks of young white men with a camera and an opinion who think they should share their amateur knowledge with the world. One thing that I hear all the time about the economy is that if a free market is allowed to flourish, and if capital is allowed to flow from locality to locality, and people are allowed to invest in opportunities that would make them wealth, then that would raise all boats within the economy. A rising tide raises all boats, and it would create jobs within those areas. It would grow the economy in the long term there. It would allow for more entrepreneurs, as those newly created jobs allow people to amass wealth, which allows them to further invest within those communities. And that's how the U.S. got to the dominant position in the world economy, is that we had an entrepreneurial spirit, and we didn't allow our market to didn't allow our government to screw things up, and we allowed the free market to flourish. And now look at us, we're dominating the world. And Europe did that also, and then we allowed Japan to do that after World War II. And now this is the first world, and the third world, they have some backwards ways, but fortunately we're exporting those ideas of capitalism and ingenuity and open markets, and we're going to get rid of protectionism and tariffs and government interference within those local economies, so that we could integrate the global system, because it's a globalized world. And if countries are allowed to pursue their comparative advantage, then that benefits everybody. This is Economics 101. It's a theory that makes sense when you hear it the first time, or you think about it in terms of three men on a deserted island. One of them is growing coconuts, another one's digging holes, and the third one's hunting for fish or whatever. And so the guy that digs holes and finds water, he can trade that for fish and coconuts. And the guys with fish and coconuts, they're better at fishing and climbing trees. And so each one pursues what they're good at, and then in the end they all benefit. And so in the bigger picture, the farmer who's living in the area where potatoes grow in Iowa is able to grow his potatoes, and then he trades that for oil in Texas, and then that guy trades that with other things from other parts of the country, or other countries around the world, where they're able to pursue things in a more efficient way than if pineapples had to be grown in Alaska. And through that trading, everybody benefits, wealth is created, and investments allowed to flow into those areas, so that it's not stifled by the poverty of the population. And so because we've opened the markets to third world countries and begun extracting their oil and taking their resources, that's benefiting everyone as the economic pie expands. This is standard free market ideology. But when we look at cases that are not three men on a deserted island or abstract economic examples, when we look at the real world instead, it's kind of a different picture. And so in theory, if you have country A and country B, and they both start from the same point, but country A has some resource, diamonds, oil, minerals, coal, timber, whatever it is, this should be better for them, because now they're able to extract this wealth from the environment. That would create higher paying jobs, and because these commodities are demanded by this country and other countries, this would be an advantage for this country. And so in theory, if all the countries were partaking in the same economic system, and we'd assume that people from Russia aren't way lazier than people from Ethiopia, and by and large people have the same values and want to benefit their self-interest, then this country would be doing better than these other countries. And so we should expect that if we look at the real world, then the countries which have those commodities, which are valued in our economic system, should be the ones that are doing the best. And also the states and localities that are have a disproportionate amount of the resources, those are the ones where the population of those localities are flourishing. What happens in the real world? In the real world, West Virginia is the poorest state in the country, despite having most of the coal. And the Congo has more minerals than maybe any other country on earth, but is also one of the most impoverished and war-torn and corrupt. And Nigeria and Saudi Arabia and Iran and Iraq and Venezuela and many other countries around the world, Russia, in certain areas of Russia, that have oil, which is or has been the most valuable commodity of at least the 20th century. Those are the nations with the most political instability, for one, and then also, despite extremely, extremely wealthy people at the top, a subclass of very impoverished people, oftentimes subjugated to repressive regimes in the country and other non-political forces, religious oftentimes, which make their lives miserable. And so it seems as if, and this is actually called the curse of black gold in the case of oil, but it seems as if the more potential wealth that a country would have in terms of resources, the worse off they are. That seems like an oversimplification, but it holds true. And so as long as a disproportionate amount of the wealth is going back to the Western corporations and the wealthy individuals within the wealthy countries, which are already wealthy, and a very, very small amount is going to the actual population of the country where the resources exist, which is the current dynamics within globalization, because right now financial capital and industry has much, much more power than organized labor or collective bargaining or the subjugated people of third world countries or impoverished states in the case of some of the poor states in the United States. As long as that dynamic continues, then having the benefit of having resources like oil, minerals, lithium, coal, timber, whatever it is, it's not really going to help the population, and it might even hobble it in the long term, because once the extraction of those resources stops and the industry pulls out, then what you have is impoverished community with no other options for meaningful employment because they were dependent on this sector for so long, in large part because politicians used it as a bludgeon to make people think that they needed it in order to survive, when in reality they were doing it because it was in their immediate interest, either politically or financially, or oftentimes both. And so economics is interesting, but power dynamics in the real world is what shapes the world around us to a much greater extent.